Welcome back everyone to the final video in the 4-part series of The World of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Journey to the North, Logs and Files of a Hidden One. And we are at the final part, Chapter 4, The Viking Age. And this is going to be a long video. This chapter is roughly 89 pages, so it'll be similar, I believe, to the first part that we did. Cynics see history as the propaganda of conquerors, but for centuries, hidden ones, lurking in civilization's shadows, have produced unfiltered accounts of human events. Recently, we've begun to classify the remarkable southward surge of raiders, tradesmen, and settlers from Norway as a distinct new era. Many church-based scholars disagree, of course, but clear-eyed observers from England, Francia, the Papal States, and all the way to Constantinople now identify the terrifying sack of Lindisfarne Abbey in Northumbria on June 8, 793, as the beginning of a new Viking age. Since that date, seafaring Norse folk have become a historical force in Europe. My own first-hand observations align with this assessment. When Basim and I first arrived at Fornburg in Norway, I admit I was surprised by the level of cultural and technical sophistication I encountered. Most accounts I'd read of Vikings depicted barbaric heathens. I should have known better. Such chronicles were largely produced by Christian clergy and others whose economic control of northern Europe was threatened by Viking incursion. Demonizing one's enemy as savage is an age-old tactic, one that even cloistered monastic scholars will employ when it suits their purposes. Thus, in service to truth, I present the following chronicle of recent events, distilled from the journals I've kept during my assignment in the Ravensthorpe Bureau. Where necessary, for accuracy or clarity, I've added notes, dossiers, and other editorial revisions, but the bulk of this document is a contemporaneous account of events as they happened. Norway. During the interminable sea journey from Constantinople to Fornburg, Basim engaged Sigurd in many discussions that touched on our true purpose in visiting Norway. Hidden One's bureaus in Europe had uncovered correspondence that suggested the Order of the Ancients was making aggressive moves into northern lands. We'd learned that Kjorv the Cruel, a Viking clan leader based in Regelfik, was a recently recruited Platonist tasked with consolidating the Order's control of the region. Kjorvik Wolf Clan, it turned out, was a longtime nemesis of Sigurd's Raven Clan. Thus, we hope to exploit the natural enmity and conscript the Raven Prince and his kinsfolk into our counteractive efforts. Major factions and sects. Raven Clan. I've spoken at length about this remarkable Viking enclave elsewhere in this journal. For Raven Clan dossiers, see Chapter 3, The Viking Settlement. But it's worth mentioning again that in my extensive travels with Basim, I've encountered few, if any, communities that I hold in such esteem. The clan's open embrace of outsiders like me is a thing of wonder. Wolf Clan. This coarse tribe of Norsemen was based in southern Norway and led by a Platonist of the order known as Kjorv the Cruel. His methods reflected his name. Indeed, the sheer brutality of Kjorv's ways likely drew the attention of the Order's hierarchy, who saw him as a suitable instrument of their plans to subjugate the northern latitudes of Europe. King Harald's Confederation. Harald Fairhair's call for Norse clans to band together under the banner of a united Norway continues to gain momentum. Based in Alkerstad, this collective of northern tribes will soon prove a formidable political entity. The effort has most certainly boosted King Harald's profile in the region. Ironically, his ambition is pushing the stronger, more independent Viking clans out of Norway. Miscellaneous Norse brigands and bandits. Various bandit gangs still operate with impunity in Regelfike's high country and back roads. Some have gathered in encampments, ready to descend on any foolish passerby. The highwaymen of Norway fight hard, swing crude clubs and axes, and sometimes sling rocks and arrows. Regelfike, battle for the Northern Way. Sigurd had already impressed us with his restless intelligence and his curiosity about the wider world beyond Norway, but I saw something truly formidable, and to be honest, a bit intimidating, in his adopted sibling, Eivor. I'll admit that I didn't fully trust her at first, and as I mentioned earlier, I was shocked when Basim entrusted her with our assassin wristblade so quickly. But over time, I grew to recognize extraordinary qualities in Eivor that my savvy mentor had identified almost immediately. Indeed, Eivor quickly became a primary agent of our plan to counter Kjolvi, the Order's northmost instrument. Key events. With our vigorous encouragement, Eivor ruthlessly scoured the Fornburg area for Kjolvi's spies, then led a lightning strike on his supply stores at Norfdal. As preparations commenced for an assault on Kjolvi's fortress, the Raven clan gained a formidable new ally in King Harald, Fairbear of Hordelfike. With his support, the storming of the Wolf clan stronghold was a resounding success. Unfortunately, my personal experience of the battle was considerably less triumphant. Basim had painstakingly trained me for the task of confronting the Order's highest ranks, but Eivor insisted on facing Kjolvi herself. A matter of family honor, she said, as Kjolvi had murdered her father in a most despicable manner. Seeing the almost feral look in her eyes, I agreed. No matter who killed Kjolvi, the hidden ones would benefit. Thus Eivor summoned Kjolvi to a one-on-one duel, which the Vikings call a holmgang. After a rather extraordinary exchange of grim insults, the fight began. At one point, Eivor seemed compromised and on the verge of annihilation. Heroically, I thought, I tried to intervene, to disastrous results. I far underestimated Kjolvi's brute strength, and his crippling parry of my attack left me badly injured. But Eivor recovered, killed Kjolvi, and acquired his Order of the Ancients medallion, an artifact signifying the bearer's allegiance to the Foul Brotherhood. An image of the great world tree Yggdrasil is embossed upon it, the mythical ash tree that connects the 9 realms. Eivor gave this sigil to Basim. Then she led the final surge through Kjolvi's fortress and chased off his sniveling son Gorm. Althing in Alkerstad. Soon after Kjolvi's demise, King Harald called for an Althing, a Norse term for an assembly of freemen, in his home settlement of Alkerstad, located in the Hordelfike region north of Reykjavik. My grave injuries left me unable to attend, but Basim escorted the Raven clan leadership. At the Althing, Harald called for unity for all clans under his kingship. Kjolvi's son Gorm emerged from hiding and offered Harald his oath and axe, but Harald banished him from Norway, renaming him Worm. Then Stilborforn, war-weary and seeking a lasting peace, shocked both Sigurd and Eivor, his heirs, by bending his knee in fealty to Harald, placing Ravenclan and its lands under the rule of the fair-helted king. Sigurd spoke out harshly. The clan's kingship was his by right, and stormed off. But Stilborn would not be dissuaded. Harald proclaimed himself King of Norway and demanded that both Eivor and Sigurd serve under him. Harald sent troops to occupy Fornburg, but the Raven clan, with Basim's blessing, did not plan to submit. As Sigurd proclaimed, "We are not the heel-ridden, heel-trodden subjects of a boy king." He called for his kin to brave Norway for England, there to make their own kingdom a new home. The sons of Ragnar and their clans had already made settlements there, so Viking kin would greet them in the new land. So here, right over here, you have Harald, King of Norway. Known as Harald Fairhair due to his flowing blonde locks, this son of Halfdan the Black believed his destiny was to unite disparate Norse clans into a single unified kingdom of Norway under his personal rule. Although fair of mind as well as hair, Harald was not above placing a ruthless boot on the throat of dissenters. Kjolvi the Cruel, right over here. Brutal head of the Wolf clan in Reigelsvik, Kjolvi employed such vicious methods of conquest that it was inevitable he'd catch the Order's admiring eye. His son Gorm rode the tails of his father's cloak as Cajofe spread the order's code of control across the Northlands. And then down here. A side note. I told my mentor Bassam how I felt I'd found long-lost family in the Raven clan, even before we set sail from Rigelsvik. Eivor, Sigurd, Randvi, and the others seemed to regard me as kin. Truth be told, I'd begun to feel more at home in Fornburg than my own Levantine village of origin. The feasts in particular, were truly remarkable communal experiences. Thus, I found the clan's abrupt decision to exit Norway somewhat disconcerting. Certainly, I understood the reason. None would bend a knee to King Harald. As Eivor put it, I will not be captive to another man's gaudy design. My destiny is my own to weave. But once the decision was made, I was stunned by the almost gleeful abandon with which the clan packed its essential belongings into 3 longships in a single day. As we set out across the North Sea, Sigurd's parting words betrayed not even a hint of nostalgia. The further I sail from this place, the louder I will sing. I must say, as much as Norse folk love their settled communities, they are most truly alive in transit, sailing to destinations unknown, seeking adventure and glory, exhilarated, fearless, unbothered by uprooting or the unknown. Indeed, Vikings on the move seem positively aglow. I believe it's the clearest expression of their essence as a people. England. First, a bit of history. Today, England comprises 4 kingdoms: Mercia, Wessex, East Anglia, and Northumbria. Some years ago, the exact date is hard to pin down, the Norse king Ragnar Lothbrok led a fearsome onslaught of Viking raiders south from Norway to a series of conquerors across the British Isles. But in 865 CE, Ragnar was defeated and captured in Northumbria. There, King Aela tossed the Viking leader into a pit of poisonous snakes and left him to die in agony. This pretty Saxon brutality triggered a fateful landslide of events. Later that year, Ragnar's vengeful son Halfdan Ragnarsson and his brothers Ivar and Ubba mustered and led the so-called Great Heathen Army of Viking warriors into England, seeking retribution and, of course, plunder. In 871 CE, a second Viking surge called the Great Summer Army, led by Guthrum, landed in Reading to reinforce Halfdan's legion. After 8 years of glorious but chaotic conquests and shifting alliances, the combined Viking force lay scattered across England's shires in a somewhat decentralized jumble. This fragmented situation is what Sigurd, Eivor, and the Raven clan encountered on their arrival from Norway. Below, I've transcribed my journal of our activities in these lands. Again, a complimentary account augmented by notes added later. Okay, this shows right here a Saxon Reaver. Major factions and sects. Saxons. After harassing Britain's coastal settlements for generations, this collection of Germanic tribes began to flow across the sea in conquering waves in the 5th century CE, filling the power void left by the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Like the Vikings who would follow 400 years later, the first Saxons arrived as seafaring raiders who quickly established coastal enclaves, then pushed inland up England's waterways. Contemporaneous writings note that by 442 CE, Saxon rule had been established across most of the island. Multiple Saxon provinces were established, but over time these evolved into today's 4 Anglo-Saxon kingdoms of Mercia, East Anglia, Northumbria, and Wessex. By the late 700s, most inhabitants had also converted to Christianity. Saxon armies were composed largely of equals, i.e., freemen of the lowest rank, mostly farmers or craftsmen with rudimentary combat training. But elite Saxon soldiers were fierce warriors with skills and tactics drawn from many years of fighting, not only against Roman legions in England, but also with them. Saxon tribesmen were often recruited by Roman overseers and trained to serve as auxiliary units. Picts. The Picts are a proud, tough, and aggressive clan from the northern hills of Britain. Little is known about this insular tribe of Christianized Celtic peoples, other than their fury on the battlefield and the intricacy of their body art. When the Romans first invaded Britain in 43 CE, they ran into furious Pict resistance. Eventually, to counter non-stop Pict harassment, the Romans, who referred to Picts as troublesome savages, built the Great Wall of Hadrian, an impressive architectural feat that spans the entire northern neck of Britain, 73 miles from coast to coast. This helped keep Pict tribes at bay for centuries. But after the Romans withdrew from England in the early 400s, the Picts flowed southward again into what is now Northumbria. In recent years, both Saxons and Vikings have driven Pict tribes back north, but often at great cost. Britons. Some have called this cluster of tribes along England's western border the Celtic Britons because of a shared Celtic heritage with Picts and other northwestern peoples. Hostile to Roman and then Saxon invaders for centuries, and now to the Norse newcomers, the Britons have frequently clashed with the kingdoms of Mercia and Wessex. Today, a powerful and clever warlord named Rhodri ap Merfyn has consolidated power over a number of Briton-dominated territories, forming a United Kingdom of Britain. Indeed, some are calling him the first king of the Britons. Leicester, Mercia, the Kingmaker's Saga. The Raven clan arrived from Norway in the central Mercian Shire of Leicester to settle and launch its first forays into regional affairs. Traditionally, the Shire's municipality of Repton had been home to the Mercian king's throne, but after the Norse invasion, Leicester devolved into a patchwork of warring camps, with the sons of Ragnar occupying Repton and the embattled King Burgred, the Mercian monarch since 852 CE, holed up in Tamworth Fortress, a well-fortified haven for his loyalists. The following journal entries chronicle how the Raven clan established its home settlement on Leicester's southern border and began a quest for regional influence. Key events. After a week of tacking across the Swam Road and other clever Norse kenning, this one referring to a sea or waterway, our little fleet glided into the mouth of the Nene River, snaking into the heart of England's midsection. Not far upstream we found a camp abandoned by the great heathen army. Halfton's old quarters featured a sturdy, serviceable longhouse, a good start for any settlement with aspirations of greatness. As Eivor suggested, the outpost was named Ravensthorpe, the village of ravens. Perfect, I must say. As the settlement steadily expanded, Raven scouts began to probe the area and make daily reports to Randvi in the Longhouse meeting room, where she tracked their findings on a map. Meanwhile, Sigurd and Eivor joined the sons of Ragnar, Ivar and Ubba Ragnarsson, in Repton, a busy municipality on the Trent River and the traditional center of power for the Mercian royal family. Local jarls were falling in line with Viking rule, but the stubborn Saxon king Burgred refused to submit. The Ragnarsson's plan: oust Burgred and install a friendly local theme, Ceolwulf II, on the throne. The new king would administer a new Mercia, uniting Saxon and Dane. King Burgred and his war thane, Leofrith, were holed up in Tamworth Fortress with a garrison of troops, doggedly weathering a Viking siege. With Eivor leading the way, the combined Viking forces breached Tamworth's sturdy gates and stormed the fortress. The Mercian monarch fled, but Eivor tracked down his secret havens. She found Burgred's queen, Lady Althawaith, sequestered in one, and after some persuasion, handled expertly by Eivor, the lady revealed her husband's location in another. After Burgred's capture, Oweden, a gathering of Mercian lords, officially decreed him unfit to rule and initiated the coronation of Ceolwulf II. Burgred formally abdicated and handed over the Mercian crown, but not before uttering a chilling curse, declaring that he'd summoned zealots of the order to hunt down and kill Eivor. So right here, we have Ubba Ragnarsson. Eivor calls Ubba the sane brother. His easy camaraderie with Sigurd has helped the Raven clan find a ready ally and an important connection to the already established Danish presence in Mercia. Here, you have Ivar the Boneless. This son of Ragnar was an intense, cruel fellow. He seemed frightening enough as an ally. I can't imagine how he'd be as a foe. Conflicting stories exist about the origin of his nickname, some flattering, some mocking. Whatever the case, I suspect nobody calls him Boneless to his grimly scarred face. A quick side note, I must say I've been impressed by the general Viking practice of what I term benevolent conquest. Make no mistake, the sheer brutality of a Viking assault is a nightmarish terror to behold. But once a targeted region submits in obedience, these northern conquestors typically rule with a light touch. They don't impose their culture or religious beliefs on the conquered. In fact, Vikings often let local thanes oversee their old districts, a reassuring continuity that local residents tend to appreciate. Here's Ceolwulf II, right over here. This savvy Saxon nobleman served in King Burgred's Mercian court during the Viking invasion. A practical man, Ceolwulf quickly assessed the situation, jumped ship to join the invaders, and agreed to assume the Mercian throne as Ragnarsson figurehead once Burgred was removed. This pact may seem disloyal or self-serving, but Ceolwulf clearly had the best interests of his people in mind, and hoped to spare them from the bloody berserker fury of the Norsemen he'd witnessed on the battlefield. And right over here, right up top, you have King Burgred. King of Mercia since 852 CE, Burgred allied with the West Saxons to defeat the local Welsh tribes and consolidate control of the region. 13 years later, the great heathen army arrived. At first, Burgred dispensed glittering mounds of hacksilver to bribe the northern invaders for peace, while he surreptitiously rallied local thanes to form a united resistance, but nobody wants to fight Vikings. Now, in 874 CE, the sons of Ragnar have made their play for the Mercian throne. After Ceolwulf's coronation, the new king banished Burgred and Aslelaeth to Rome, never to return. But sudden word of Mercian troops led by Leofrith assaulting Repton sent the Vikings rushing off to repel the counterattack and to protect Ceolbert, the new king's son and heir. As intense fighting roiled Repton streets, Eivor tracked them and defeated the great Saxon general. With Leicester now a pledged ally, Eivor returned to Ravensthorpe and reported the news to Randvi. Together they selected the next alliance target, Grantisburyshire, and the summer army of the Danes. Eivor also made a full report to me at my bureau. So here it shows Ivar Ragnarsson, a ruthless military leader, a maniac of heathen, and a skilled warrior. Zealots. Zealots may be disguised as holy ones, but they execute a distinctly unholy plan. These fierce foot soldiers of the Order of the Ancients wander the earth, brutally enforcing the dictates of their sect. Each one has a unique set of skills and proclivities, a warrior code, developed in secret training within Saxon, Anglian, or Brittonic material traditions. Lady Athelstolith. This daughter of Archewulf, the late King of Wessex, married Burgred to become Queen of Mercia. A proud but pragmatic woman, Aselwith had deep affection for not only her personal entourage, but all her Mercian subjects. Rumors persist that her father had favored the precepts of her order's enemies, but the lady didn't appear to share this inclination. Ceolbert, which is right here, this guy, son of Ceolwulf II, this unfortunate lad was conscripted into the machinations of power politics when his father became the puppet king of Mercia. Eivor invested considerable effort in mentoring the young fellow in the ways of war and leadership. Unfortunately, so did Ivar Ragnarsson. And Leofrith, right over here. Burgred's war thane Leofrith guided Mercian forces to victory after victory in the region, until he encountered the unmatched ferocity of the great heathen army. After Repton fell to the Vikings, Leofrith pulled his troops back into Tamworth Fortress. Mercian survivors describe him as a clear-thinking general who realized that only a shrewd deal could protect his people from massacre. Grantisburyshire, Mercia, the Song of Soma. The so-called Great Summer Army of Danes, led by Guthrum, had joined the original Viking invasion force, the Great Heathen Army, in pacifying Mercia and Northumbria, then moved south to establish control of Grantisburyshire. From there, Guthrum headed into Wessex, but left the skilled warrior Soma in charge of Grantebridge, a bustling hub of trade. Her charisma and impressive mastery of trade logistics made Soma the perfect Jarlsona. But when Eivor rode south from Ravensthorpe to seek alliance, she found that a Saxon force had driven Soma's Danes from Grantebridge. Seeking bureaus. Just a few decades after Emperor Claudius conquered Britannia in 41 CE to make it a Roman province, my Hidden One predecessor began establishing bureaus on this island. By the time of the final Roman withdrawal from England in about 410 CE, 6 bureaus were fully operational here. Ultimately, they had to be shut down. I urged Eivor to keep a sharp eye out for these abandoned offices hoping to find long-lost codex pages that could shed light on our history in the region. She discovered the old Royalty Bureau in the eastern outskirts of the city of Leicester. Key events. The Saxon assault, led by a Platinus of the order named Wigmund, had driven Soma's fighters across the Great Ouse River and scattered them through the fenlands northeast of town. Soma asked Eivor to rescue a trio of her trusted advisors, scattered in the foggy marshes. After rounding them up, Eivor helped Soma reassemble force, counterattack, and retake their post in Grantebridge. In gratitude, Soma let Eivor sound the victory horn. But Soma feared that one of her 3 lieutenants had betrayed her by revealing the existence of a secret tunnel system excavated under the town. Eivor helped her smoke out the culprit and then assassinated Wigmund in a nearby monastery, acquiring his order medallion for me. This not only eliminated Soma's primary Saxon nemesis in Grantebridgeshire, but also shattered the order's organization in the Shire. In the end, Eivor's Raven clan gained a great ally in Soma Yarksona and the Danes of Grantebridge. After Eivor reported to Ranvi on the successful alliance with Soma, a wave of vicious Norse bandits suddenly rolled through Ravensthorpe. Fortunately, the attack was thwarted. A lone enemy survivor admitted that his crew came by way of East Anglia, where chaos had filled the void left by the Viking army's focus on Mercia. And here's Soma right here. A fierce fighter of Sami origin, Soma left the northmostern realms of Norway, a region some refer to as Lapland, to join the Viking invasion of England. Both Ubba and Guthrum recognized her natural qualities of leadership, so they put her in charge at Grantebridge, a key trade center with military significance. East Anglia. The Tale of Thane Oswald. The Danish bandits who attacked Ravensthorpe served a clan leader named Rued, a murderous brigand based in East Anglia. After conquering that kingdom, Halfdan Jarl had assigned a fellow Dane named Finner as steward. Finner's job was to appoint a local thane to rule as client king, much like Ceolwulf II in Mercia. Halfdan demanded the candidate be Saxon, but married to a Dane as a display of unity. But years later, no king had yet been anointed. Meanwhile, East Anglia's boggy countryside had descended into lawless chaos, a chaos now threatening to spread to other territories. Reports from Ranvi's scouts referred to East Anglia's patchwork of swamps as a sinkhole of blood and misery, after years of war and attrition. Rued's brutal clan continued to plunder its way across the kingdom. Key events. Eivor traveled to East Anglia's ruling see, Northwy, to meet Halfdan's steward. His first attempt to crown a Saxon puppet had ended when Rued's clan perforated the unfortunate lord with a deadly flight of hunter's arrows. Finner told Eivor that his new candidate, an elderman named Oswald of Elmenham, was the last Saxon noble with any regional influence, but Oswald could not rule without strong Viking support. By marrying a Dane named Valdis, a cousin of Halfdan, Oswald hoped to gain the allegiance of her powerful family, but Valdis's brothers would not approve, seeing Oswald as soft and unworthy. With Eivor's help, Oswald slowly began to earn the Vikings' respect. Eventually, he led a crew, including Valdis and her brothers, to Rued's hideout, a fort in Dunwick. There, Oswald challenged Rued to a holmgang, the renowned Viking duel. Locked in a desperate death grip, both combatants fell off a high tower, and both were presumed deceased. So here's Oswald right here. This young thane of Norfolk seemed far from capable of serving as king of East Anglia, but his earnest nature eventually won over not only Eivor and Finner, but more importantly his subjects of the realm. The people's respect made for a much more potent and dynamic feud. Finner right here. As Halfdan's long-suffering steward of East Anglia, Finner despaired of finding any Saxon candidate suitable to ascend the kingdom's throne. Drink and cynicism had dulled his edge, but Eivor's intervention gave Finner a new hope. He was destined to become a stalwart ally of the Raven clan. Brave Oswald's apparent demise inspired his Saxon kinfolk to rise up and form a fyrd, an army of peasants and farmers, to join Eivor, Valdis, and the Danes in an assault on the remaining outlaws holed up in Rued's stronghold, the imposing Burg Castle on East Anglia's coast. First, Viking longships launched a daring seaboard attack. Then Eivor and her Viking warriors breached the gates and infiltrated the castle, where they found that both Oswald and Rued had somehow survived the fall at Dunwick. Eivor defeated Rued, and the castle fell. In short order, the newly crowned King Oswald of East Anglia wed Valdis, the Queen Finner called soul, fist, and beauty of this land. and with Oswald's gateful pledge of allegiance in hand, Eivor returned to Ravensthorpe to drop a raven marker atop East Anglia on Randvi's map. Right over here is Valdis. Betrothed to Oswald, Valdis was slated to be Queen of East Anglia, but Valdis was more than just a nuptial bargaining chip in the melding of kingdoms. A stalwart clan leader and a Viking warrior of great prowess, she would be a powerful ally for Ravensthorpe. And here's Rued. This cruel head of a Dane raiding clan terrorized East Anglia for years. His followers laid gleeful waste to entire townships as they pillaged across the Eastland marshes. Oxfordshire, Mercia, the Paladin's Stone. Eivor traveled south to the township of Buckingham in Oxfordshire to rendezvous with Sigurd and Basim. There they would meet Giedric, a Saxon thane they hoped to install as the Shire's new ealdorman. Giedric led a group of local lords locked in a grim power struggle with Lady Eldwin, widow of the previous ealdorman, Theodoric. Randvi's scouts had found reports on Edwin's relentless efforts to seek Saxon allies, including outreach to the arrowed Viking foe Alfred of Wessex. Indeed, Buckingham was growing ever more hostile to the Norsemen and other outsiders. Here's Lady Edwin right here. This lady was tough as boiled leather by all accounts and hated Danes. She bore a nasty grudge against them as her husband was killed in a raid by Guthrum's army. Thus she conspired with the Saxon lord Alfred of Wessex to keep the Shire's ruling rank in her family and to keep Oxfordshire free of Viking influence. Key events. Sigurd called Alfred's fearsome king, whose support for Edwin would likely eliminate Oxfordshire as a possible ally of the Raven clan. The lady's initial plan was to simply behead any thane in the Shire who opposed her rule, but Eivor, Sigurd, and Basim managed to avert a planned mass execution of Giedric's followers. These newly liberated thanes then rushed a field of fighters to back Giedric in his looming civil war against Edwin and her Wessex allies. But Eivor reported that Basim and Sigurd seemed far more interested in the fate of a so-called holy woman named Folki, imprisoned by Edwin in the abbey dungeon at St. Albans. One disdainful thane called Folki, a sour of poisoned knowledge and an enemy of the church, a madwoman and a heretic, but both Sigurd and Basim claimed that Folki harbored some sort of secret that could change everything. Here's Giedric right here. He may be a thane, but nobility is not his caste. A dogged, determined man who fights the way he talks, blunt and to the point, Giedric earned his rank and land from Theodoric, the Shire's late ealdorman. His rough-hewn style and unwavering loyalty have earned him a loyal following of fellow thanes. With Eivor's help, they sprung the woman from St. Albans and queried her about a particular monolith carved with ancient runes. She knew it and called it the Saga Stone. As it turned out, Lady Edwin had hauled off the artifact to her stronghold in Sinibel Castle. Storming the castle with Giedric and his feared fighters, the Vikings defeated Edwin and her troops. Eivor gained Giedric's pledge of alliance between Oxfordshire and the Raven clan, and the Saga Stone was recovered. But when King Alfred suddenly arrived with a large Wessex army, Sigurd called for a parley with the Saxon leader. Alfred agreed to turn back in exchange for a Danish withdrawal north across the great Osi River. The negotiation included an exchange of warriors, Sigurd for Alfred's war thane Wulfich, to solidify the truce. But Eivor was disturbed when Folki took charge of Sigurd. I was relieved to learn that Basim moved to shadow them and monitor Sigurd's safety. One final note. In a report to me, Eivor spoke of an odd, secretive sort of partnership emerging between Sigurd and Basim. Basim had blinded her brother with grandiose ideas, such as Sigurd proclaiming himself a god. I found myself sharing Eivor's skeptical appraisal of the entire situation. This mysterious saga stone and Folki's fantasies of a demiurge she called Saklis from an ancient race of lesser gods. But what of Sigurd's strange dreams and prophecies? This is Folki right here. This charismatic Flemish woman has dabbled in Gnostic mysticism, adding strange dark twists to Christian dogma. Her fascination with Sigurd was most disturbing. She claimed to see him as a deific figure, a characterization which with both my mentor Basim and Sigurd himself seemed to concur. And here is Alfred of Wessex, Alfred, King of Wessex. This scholarly Christian monarch attained the throne of Wessex in 871 when his brother, King Athelfrid, succumbed to battle wounds fighting Halfdan's great heathen army at Marathon. Despite his bookish demeanor, Alfred is an accomplished military strategist and field general. His boyhood pilgrimage to visit Pope Leo IV in Rome, a meeting filled with Leo's blustery tales of fighting Saracen heathens in Austria, made a lasting impression on the lad. London, the city of war. While decadent London was a war zone, torn by years of fighting between Wessexans, Mercians, and Danes, now the Order of the Ancients was using this chaos to recruit soldiers and extend its grip over England. I was most grateful when Eivor agreed to investigate the city where the Order had dug in its claws. London had long resisted attempts to tamp down its turmoil, fending off even the Ragnarsons and the Summer Army when they occupied the site as a winter bivouac. Randvi sent Eivor to the city's north gate, known as Krepel Gate, to seek entrance and assess the situation. There she met Stow, the Shire Reeve of London's western half, the king's representative, tasked with enforcing laws and collecting taxes in that district. But when Stow escorted Eivor to the governor's villa to discuss terms of a possible alliance with the Raven clan, they arrived to the gruesome aftermath of a terrible murder. Key events. Eivor investigated the bloody scene of Governor Trigger's murder. A note there, written by the same poor fellow soldier of Christ we'd seen before, spoke of 3 heathens from an order of heretics, clearly the Order of the Ancients, and listed them as the Arrow, the Leech, and the Compass. Eivor concluded that these were Trigger's murderers. With help from Stow and his fellow Reeve Urke, she managed to eliminate the first 2 operatives and then lure their leader, the Compass, to a final reckoning. Eivor delivered the Order medallion she'd gathered to my bureau in Ravensthorpe and reported her success in purging London of the Order's scourge. It was certainly good news, but tempered by the latest intelligence from my own Hidden Ones network, it seemed Jorvik, the capital of the Kingdom of Northumbria, was suffering the same blight. The Order was moving swiftly through the city's veins like an evil humor. Here is Stow and Urke right here, the Reeves of London. A native son of London, the Saxon Stow partnered with his imported Dane counterpart Urke to serve as the 2 Shire Reeves of the city. Overseeing London's western half, Stow was a fair, honest man of humble origins and quiet strength. Urke, a soldier who rose to the position of Reeve via somewhat shadier dealings, administered London's East Borough. Despite their differences, the 2 remained loyal friends. In Eivor's eyes, the pair seemed well capable of keeping an equitable peace in London. Vinland, in a strange land. Eivor's first encounter with a high-ranking member of the Order was her dispatch of Kjorve, the Axe, at Norway. Next, in the course of establishing early alliances in England, Eivor eliminated 2 key Platonist figures, Hunta, the Baldric in Leicestershire, and Leighlofew, the Scabbard in Grantobertshire. Notes found on these targets and the 3 Order members recently assassinated in London helped us reveal the identity of a high-ranking magister known as the Keel. This snake turned out to be none other than Eivor's Old Wolf clan nemesis Gorm Gjorvison. Gorm was not easy to reach, however. My contacts reported he'd taken his father's Kjolfe's place in the Order hierarchy and traveled to a new shore, a mysterious land called Vinland, far west of England, said to be discovered centuries ago by an Irish sailor named Brendan. Seeing the Order's dark ambitions seeping westward as a direct threat to her own campaign to secure alliances in Britain, Eivor agreed to undertake the hazardous sea journey to Vinland and hunt down the Keel. Key events. Randvi provided Eivor the disguise of a common sailor's clothing and sent her to a merchant named Nessa to navigate the voyage to Vinland. After tracking west for 3 arduous weeks on the Whale Road, as the Vikings call the sea, the longship arrived in what Nessa called St. Brendan's Land. Unfortunately, Eivor's disguise precluded the transport of her formidable score of weapons and gear. However, after arrival in Vinland, she found a way to hunt and trade goods for better equipment. Gorm Kjolvitsen, Magister of the Order. Exiled from his homeland and given the moniker Worm by King Harold of Norway, this sour son of Kjolfe the Cruel was an easy mark for the Order, an organization that preys on discontent. Indeed, Gorm's bitterness fueled a rapid rise through the ranks, His deployment to Vinland suggested a troubling new focus for the Order's expansion plans. Once Eivor was properly equipped, she tracked Gorm to one of his camps in the wilderness and assassinated him. She said he fell fast and dropped an odd artifact, a crystal ball humming with strange, unearthly power. Eivor left the glowing item with local leaders, telling them, "This seems to belong to your land." They thanked her, calling her Kennerkaken. Then Eivor embarked on the long, cold journey home to Ravensthorpe. When Eivor reported this, I told her, "Another master of the Order, hewn from the trunk of their dying tree. We are getting closer to the roots." Skyrupshire, Mercia, the Book of Dragons. Randvi informed Eivor that Ceolwulf II's son Kelbert was in a tight spot in Skyrupshire, a place mired in a long, bitter war of attrition against the Britons to the west. Ceolbert had hoped to negotiate a truce with the Briton king Rodri. Both sides were war-weary, but Randvi feared the young prince wasn't fully up to the task just yet. Thus Eivor set out to supervise the talks, arriving in the township of Quadford on the Affenhalfern River to find Ceolbert sparring with Ivar Ragnarsson in the Longhouse. Ivar's way of showing affection for the lad, apparently. Rodri and his queen Argenhard waited nearby, and a bishop named Deolarf was standing in his temporary ealdorman. Bishop Deolarf, serving as interim ealdorman until young Ceolbert could take the mantle. The Bishop of Quadford was an almost perpetually calm man. Is such a trait reassuring or unnerving? I found it interesting that an aggressive leader like Eivor regarded Bishop Deolarf's cautions counsel as well-measured, even wise. And here's Rodri, king of the Britons. A strong and somewhat impetuous man, Rodri was king of the Britons west of Mercia for nearly 4 decades. For years he clashed with both Saxons and Vikings, even faced down the vaunted king-killer, Ivar Ragnarsson, leaving a scar on his face. Rodri would not be bullied at the Quadford parley for peace. Key events. Unfortunately, Ivar's reckless brutality shattered the parley for peace. Ivar bore a wicked grudge against Rodri, who had inflicted the nasty scar on Ivar's face. Rodri, Angerhard, and their war thane Einar escaped as Quadford streets turned into a wild melee. After the Danes cleared the Briton troops from the township, Eivor went on a raiding mission, decimating Rodri's supply lines while recruiting a furtive locals for the upcoming battle. Finally, Eivor met Ivar and Ceolbert in Webershire and torched the town. This lured Einar into a fight, and Eivor slew him in a battle of titans. Afterward, Bishop Deolarf invited Rodri to another meeting, seeking to lock in a lasting accord between Britons and the Mercian Shire. Lady Angerhard handled negotiations for her side. The hot-blooded rivals Ivar and Rodri were kept away, as was the ealdorman-in-waiting Ceolbert, who was out boar hunting. With cooler heads conducting the parley, a truce was finally declared. But alas, when Eivor sought Ceolbert to relate the good news, she found him in a cave, a victim of murder. The dagger lodged in his chest was of Briton design, and the angry Danes swore to exact vengeance. Ivar led a ferocious assault on Rodri's stronghold at Carstal Castle, and in the end the Britons were defeated, and Rodri hauled up to Maidstone Rock to suffer the gruesome Viking torture known as the Blood Eagle, a truly sadistic ritual and a low mark of Norse culture, in my estimation. But then came an unexpected twist of the knife. Ivar, in a fit of crazed megalomania, admitted to Eivor it was he who killed Ceolbert to spark a war, and he challenged Eivor to a death duel, and thus did Ivar the Boneless, king-killer, meet his doom. Back in Quadford, the good Bishop Deolarf was named Ealdorman of the Shire, and pledged alliance to Ravensthorpe. Lady Angerhard swore peace, and the long years of bloodshed between Britons and the Saxons of Skryroshire was ended. Angerhard, Lady of the Britons. Lady Angerhard of Seisellig brought an entire western kingdom to her marriage with Rodri. A well-educated woman, she also brought a measure of clear-headed sight, the perfect partner for her occasionally hot-headed husband. Scent, Wessex, the instrument of the ancients. My mentor Bassett informed Randvi that he located the general whereabouts of the madwoman Folke. She'd hauled her hostage Sigurd to the Wessex Shire of Scent, the religious heartland of England. Eivor met Bassett at St. Hadrian's Priory and was introduced to a well-connected and power-hungry abbot named Cinnaber. In exchange for helping the ambitious monk plot his rise to Alderman of Kent, Eivor and Bassam planned to use his Shire-wide network of spies to track down Fulke and liberate Sigurd. Here's Abbot Cinebert right here. Sitting atop Kent's religious hierarchy, the abbot was a classic power broker whose secret agenda was leveraging the power he brokered for his own purposes. With eyes and ears everywhere in the Shire, Cinebert promised to find where Fulke incarcerated Sigurd for a price. Key events. Once Eivor learned the King Alfred of Wessex planned to appoint as Alderman of Kent a thane named Tedmund, Cinebert concocted a scheme to acquire influence with his new leader. The sneaky abbot conscripted Eivor and Bassam to conduct a full-scale assault on Tedmund's stronghold at Rossishire fortress on the Medigugu River, after which the good abbot would swoop in to rescue Tedmund via ransom. Reinforced with feared warriors led by Giedrick from Oxfordshire, Eivor's Vikings routed the Wessexian defenders and captured Tedmund. But before Eivor and Bassam could arrange the sham ransom exchange with Abbot Cinebert, Tedmund dropped dead, a victim of poison. Soon after, Eivor and Bassam tried to reconvene with the clergyman, only to find him assassinated by none other than Fulke herself. Fulke delivered a strange soliloquy about Sigurd's godhood, then fled. Eivor and Bassam tracked her to an Order of the Ancient sanctum beneath the famed cathedral in Canterbury. There they discovered a trove of order documents, some of which revealed Fulke's high rank in that foul hierarchy. Unfortunately, Fulke and Sigurd were already gone, left behind a small box holding the grisly remains of Sigurd's right forearm, plus a cryptic half-burned scrap of scroll with details of Portishire Castle in Sussex, a seemingly impregnable bastion where the Order trained its soldiers. Could Fulke have taken Sigurd there? Bassam also recovered a number of other confidential Order documents, earmarked for my own study. One sad postscript. When Eivor returned to Ravensthorpe to make a report to Randvi, one of Sigurd's fiercest allies, Dag, openly challenged Eivor's position as interim clan leader. Eivor was forced to duel her lifelong clanmate to the death. His death, of course. Essex in Wessex. A bravery of broken hearts. Randvi received a summons from Briston, Alderman of Essex, and Lady Estrid, requesting help in a matter of great secrecy. Briston's leadership qualities had long been in question. His thanes saw him as too self-indulgent to govern the Shire responsibly, and they were growing rebellious. Randvi hoped Eivor's intercession might bring stability to Essex, plus an invaluable pledge of alliance in return. But when Eivor journeyed to the country seat of Colchester, she found the ruling couple's proposition to be particularly personal and slightly bizarre. Estrid, Lady of Essex. This Frankish noblewoman's arranged marriage to Alderman Bierston brought great political benefit to Essex, but only misery to her. Estrid's great beauty and parlor wit were lost on her hunting-obsessed husband, and she missed her continental homeland terribly. Bierston, Alderman of Essex. More an outdoorsman than a ruler, Bierston ignored his sophisticated wife and pined for his childhood love, Alfida. Eivor reported that after she rescued Bierston from a hunting catastrophe, he thanked her and exclaimed, "We Saxons hear only that Danes and Norse are ferocious barbarians, all teeth and claws, with little subtlety or wit." Alas, this unfortunate misreading of Viking culture remains widespread in Anglo-Saxon circles. Key events. Bierston and Estrid, it turned out, were extremely unhappy in their marriage, a union of political necessity, not love. Estrid, a Frankish princess who loathed Essex, wanted only to return to Francia. Meanwhile, Bierston pined for his true love, a Saxon woman named Alfida. The Essessian couple called their plot to rectify the situation a woman lost and a woman found. First, fake Estrid's kidnapping and ferry her back to her homeland, and then track down Alfida for Bierston and bring her to the Alderman's house. Since the payoff would be a valuable strategic alliance for Ravenclan, Eivor agreed to facilitate this convoluted plan. Finding Alfida was easy enough. A poor peasant woman now, she lived a simple life in the town of Menton with her younger brother Iluric. But in engineering Estrid's fake kidnapping was trickier. First, Eivor had to contact the fellow originally hired to carry out the abduction, a strapping young dame named Rollo. After liberating Rollo's band of fighters in Port Walton, Eivor sent them to Colchester for the Lammas festival per Estrid's instructions. Using the festival commotion as cover, Rollo and his crew slipped into town to create a showy diversion so Eivor could kidnap Estrid and sneak her off to the coast. Rollo. This fiery young Viking from Norway has displayed a robust ambition since arriving in England as a warrior of note with Guthrum's great summer army. Eivor believes this strapping lad is destined for greatness. I'm not sure I see it in him myself, but I've grown to trust Eivor's judgment in such matters. Setbacks nearly derailed the plot, but in the end, Rollo's sea steed whisked Istrid across the channel to Francia, and a happy Bjornsson heartily pledged the allegiance of Essex to Ravensthorpe. The ealdorman even picked up an heir in the overall transaction when he learned that Alfeda's brother, Iluric, was actually her son by Bjornsson. Lincolnshire, Mercia, the Lay of Hunwald. In Ravensthorpe, we met a gorgeous young nobleman named Hunwald, son of Lincolnshire's ailing ealdorman. The young lord was banished from his shire by a cadre of unscrupulous thanes and clergy seeking to keep him from succeeding his father. Hired assassins seemed to be stalking him as well. Hunwald believed himself the successor to a long line of Anglian kings, heirs to the legendary kingdom of Lindsey. He promised Eivor a steadfast alliance with Lincolnshire in exchange for help regaining his place at his father's side. But when Eivor escorted Hunwald back to Lincoln, the lad called the city a hornet's nest. They learned that his ealdorman father, Hundelberg, had been summarily removed to some undisclosed location. Hunwald. Self-proclaimed Prince of Lindsey and son of Lincolnshire's ealdorman, Hundelberg, this sincere lad sought to protect his ailing, garrulous father from the greedy thanes and clergy trying to control the old man. Eivor believed that despite his naivety and gregarious bluster, Hunwald's earnest heart gave him the primary quality of a good and fair ruler. Key events. After quite a bit of effort and investigation, Eivor finally tracked down Hunwald's father to Bolingbroke Castle. Unfortunately, the ealdorman's health had deteriorated too much, and by the time Eivor reached Hundelborg, the Lord of Lincolnshire was dead. Back in London, the sad news prompted the bishop, Herefith, to call for a shire moot, an assembly of the ruling class, much like a Witan or a Viking Althing, to select a new ealdorman. In the end, Eivor attended the shire moot in Lincoln and supported Hunwald's candidacy for ealdorman over the other contenders, including Bishop Herefith. This proved a good choice. The cleric turned out to be none other than Crozier, a purist of the Order of the Ancients that my own investigation had revealed to be lurking in Lincolnshire. His perfidy was terrible, but Eivor's justice was equally so. After leading Hunwald's fyrd in a fierce assault on the fortress of Ancaster, Herefith's stronghold, Eivor acquired yet another order medallion from my collection. Herefith, Bishop of Lincoln. The bishop spent many years serving his parishioners, and more importantly the ruling class of Lincolnshire, including ealdorman Hunderbolt and his son Hunwald. What nobody knew is that Herefith was secretly a provost of the order, operating under the codename the Crozier. The foul cleric used his post to indoctrinate his flock and manipulate the shire's political hierarchy. Sussex and Wessex. The Siege of Portchester. Eivor soon tired of waiting for word from Bassam. Sigurd had been in Fulke's care long enough. After consulting with Randvi, Eivor decided to call in favors from the Raven clan's carefully cultivated alliances. Her plan: launch a full-scale invasion of Sussex and lay siege to the supposedly impenetrable fortress of Portchester, where a maimed Sigurd languished in captivity. As her army gathered piecemeal in a staging area at Kronesheim, Eivor met Bassam and the legendary Guthrum, the Reaver of the South, who led the great summer army as it stormed through Mercia and Northumbria. The fearsome Viking Jarl now had his eyes set on Wessex, looking to rout his nemesis, King Alfred. Key events. Eivor's allies began to rally in Sussex to support her expedition. Stow and Erki, the Reeves of London, Brother and Border, brothers of the East Anglian Queen, the Viking leaders of Ubba Ragnarsson and Soma Jarlkassa from Grantebridgeshire, and others pledged to an alliance with Ravenclan. After defeating a regiment of Wessex fighters in the hills south of Sister Abbey, Eivor and her allies cut off multiple supply lines to Portchester and sabotaged Saxon garrisons, hoping to weaken Fulke before her forces could settle in and fortify their citadel. As Eivor's invasion force continued to assemble in their forward camp for the Portchester assault, new arrivals included Hunwald and his archers of Lincolnshire, and Bjornsson delivering a brutal battering ram from Essex. Even Bishop Dirilef arrived to lend his support. His aid proved invaluable when his men of Skyropeshire launched diversionary strikes on a large column of King Alfred's West Saxon troops marching from Winchester to reinforce Fulke's garrison. Meanwhile, a wild, chaotic frontal assault breached the Portishead gates. Eivor and Basim tracked down Sigurd, and the livid Viking terminated the insidious influence of Fulke in a final duel. Sigurd returned to Ravensthorpe, a dark, melancholy shadow of the man he once was, believing himself to be an actual god reborn. Both Eivor and I found this most disturbing. Guthrum. The opposing Viking Jarl landed his great summer army at Reading in 871 and marched to join forces with Halfdan's great heathen army. After a series of victories in the north, Guthrum led a sizable contingent south into Wessex, where he launched a bloody campaign against King Alfred's Saxon forces. Jorvik, the city of greed. Over the past decade, Jorvik has grown to rival London not only as a center of commerce, but also as a hotbed of the Order's corruption of England. Recent surveillance by Hidden One's agents revealed 3 more high-ranking Order members recruiting and spreading their poisonous tenets across the city. I passed this intelligence to Eivor and strongly encouraged her to impede the trio's efforts. Randvi suggested that she start by consulting a pair of Old Norseland friends, Hjor and Luvchina, who'd spent recent years helping to develop Jorvik into a thriving center of international trade. Hjor Halfson. Years of experience in Norway's royal courts prepared Hjor for a leadership role in Jorvik, where he sat on King Risi's council of advisors. His knack for commerce made him an important voice for the city's merchant class. With his wife, Luvina, he became a stalwart ally of the Raven clan. Luvina Bjarmstrader. A fearsome warrior, Luvina did not share her husband Hjor's affinity for political maneuvering and the accumulation of personal wealth. She once told Eivor, "Politics, it takes the Norse out of a Norse," an essentially Viking sentiment, I must say. Luvina originally hails from Bjarmland, a territory well northeast of Norway, where some say she was a restless adventure-seeking princess. Key events. When Eivor arrived in Jorvik, the Order, operating under the name the Red Hand, had already sent things to raid Luvina's home. Luvina tore them to shreds. A letter delivered from the mysterious poor fellow soldier of Christ revealed code designations of the group's ranking members: the Needle, the Firebrand, and the Vault. Eivor and Hjor met with the King of Northumbria, Rikus, and agreed to target the criminal group. Investigations revealed that the Order was collecting Christian texts in order to destroy them. First, Eivor tracked down and killed the Firebrand, who turned out to be the Abbess Ingelborg, a woman plucked from the church by the Order, lured by the belief that common folk cannot be trusted to interpret truth for themselves. The Order offered one truth and only one. As the Abbess told Eivor, knowledge must be controlled. Next, Eivor ended the suffering wrought on city merchants by the Needle, who turned out to be the Jorvik dockmaster Grigorli. Finally, Eivor hunted down the ringleader of the Vault, none other than the councilman Aldun, High Reeve of Jorvik and one of Halfdan's favored thanes, who had secretly succumbed to the lure of power and riches woven into the Order's cloth of treachery. Uvershire, Northumbria. The Sayings of Halfdan. Randvi reported that Halfdan Ragnarsson, conqueror of the North, had sent an intriguing summons to Eivor Wolfkist. After hearing of her exploits, the legendary Viking leader invited the hero of Jorvik to his war camp in the Northumbrian shire of Uvershire. For years, Halfdan Jarl had ruled the northern territories with a sense of common purpose. Norse and Saxon alike respected and followed him. But lately, sapped by constant vigilance, working non-stop to secure his northern border from incessant picked raids, the great warrior was beset by weariness, and worse, by paranoia. Halfdan feared the members of his own inner circle were seeking to usurp him, including perhaps the Saxon puppet he'd installed as King of Northumbria, Siege. We go back to when Eva returned from Jorvik to Ravensthorpe after her successful purge. She brought far more than just another pledge of alliance. Checking in at my bureau, she displayed an even deeper desire to combat the Order's plague. And then we talk about Siege, King of Northumbria. Observing England's northern kingdom as Halfdan's puppet, King in Jorvik, Siege was a cynical and cunning monarch. He knew his place, but he did not like it. The city's corrupt mercenary milieu suited him well, but he welcomed Eivor's intercession with the deadly Red Hand Syndicate, a front organization for the Order of the Ancients. So key events. Halfdan suspected his longtime war chief and friend Faravid of plotting treason against him and asked Eivor to investigate. Eivor joined Faravid's war party in an attack on a picked warband in Stunwich camp. There, she learned that Faravid was also planning an assault on a major picked stronghold, Magnus Fortress, but without Halfdan's consent. Eivor took a calculated risk by employing Hjor and Jorvik to falsify orders from Halfdan to King Resiege in order to procure the support of a Saxon Fjord for the attack on Magnus. The traitorous Resiege and the Saxons secretly slipped off to ally with the Picts. Viking forces led by Halfdan and his lieutenants Eivor, Lugina, and Faravid secured Magnus Fortress, but suddenly Resiege and his Fjord descended on the stronghold from the north. In the ensuing slaughter, Halfdan's warriors repelled the united Picts and Saxons. Then Eivor hunted down Resiege, ending his treason with her blade. Afterward, back in Jorvik's royal hall, a final scene played out. Halfdan had decided to forego any future puppet kings and chose to assume the throne and its great burdens himself. But as the coronation unfolded, another treachery was revealed. For years, Faravid had been gifting Halfdan Jarl with drinking cups made of lead. The poison had slowly debilitated the great leader. Eivor's desire to secure an alliance with Yervashire led her to back Halfdan and sadly to serve as Halfdan's champion in a duel with Faravid. After Eivor defeated the unpeasant war chief, Halfdan administered bloody justice. During this time I received a strange letter, another missive from the one calling himself a poor fellow soldier of Christ, the same correspondent who had guided Eivor to several order members earlier. This note pointed to a man in white at the House of God in Winchester. Gloucestershire, Mercia. A tale of wicker fire. Eivor went to Gloucestershire seeking alliance, of course, but also to stand with Gunnar, the Ravenclan's beloved but chronically lovelorn blacksmith. Gunnar had fallen for a woman named Brigid, a lovely girl with a truly vexing accent, and traveled to Gloucestershire and western Mercia to marry her. Unfortunately, Eivor's journey of personal support soon turned into something else entirely. She arrived during the Shire's annual harvest festival, known as Samhain, an oddly pagan rite for a town full of Christians. Samhain revelers dressed like spirits and monsters paid tribute to souls of the dead, and the whole thing culminated in the burning of a giant wooden effigy called the Wicker Man. Key events. Eivor was shocked that this year's Samhain celebration would include the ritual sacrifice of the Shire's alderman, a strangely good-turned fellow named Sinan. This man would be caged inside the Wicker Man and burned alive. Eivor found Sinan's willingness to submit to this macabre practice quite unsettling. After Gunnar introduced Brigid, his betrothed, Eivor met Sinan's designated successor, Tudor, a young man with a wary distrust of pagans, i.e. Norse. Ironic that any participant in this bizarre Samhain festival could Askins and anyone else for their so-called paganism. Regardless, Eivor decided to embrace the Samhain spirits, literally. As she swilled ale with Tudor, the two descended into quite a bout of drunken carousing. Eivor awoke in Tudor's hut the next morning, surrounded by the aftermath of a shocking massacre. Dead bodyguards, shattered furniture, blood spattered everywhere, and her drinking partner missing. Sinan appeared with guards and accused Eivor of murdering Tudor, but she escaped, and with the help of a local pagan witch named Modron, found clues in the Celtic hinterland that led her to Tudor. He'd been attacked by outlaws hired by Sinan to kill him, but the killers double-crossed the alderman by kidnapping Tudor instead, hoping that by keeping him alive, they could extort more money. Eivor freed Tudor, left him with Modron for safekeeping, and then tracked down Sinan and his entourage. Eivor eventually discovered that the plot was the result of both personal and political complications. Years ago, Modron and Sinan had an illicit union that produced a child. Modron feared the designation of a fervent, militant Christian like Tudor as alderman. Thus, she threatened to expose Sinan's mortal sin, laying with a pagan witch, a true abomination in a Christian shire, unless he helped her arrange Tudor's assassination. Fortunately, Eivor intervened to save Tudor's life. In the end, both Sinan and Modron faced justice administered by the Wolf-Kissed One, and a strong bond of allegiance was built with the new alderman of Gloucestershire. So we have Kynan, or Sinan. 20 years he directed Gloucestershire as alderman. Now Sinan planned to pass on the torch of leadership to his chosen successor, Tudor. Interestingly, this torch passing included actual torch work. The transition of power would be consummated by Sinan's ritual immolation inside a wooden effigy called the Wicker Man. I never cease to be amazed by these Saxon Christians and their odd blend of enlightened goodwill and barbarous cruelty. And Tudor. At first, this devout Christian pilgrim deplored any hint of paganism. For example, Eivor's Norsens and the healer Modron and her Celtic rites, but eventually his initial aversion to Eivor eroded in the face of their growing camaraderie and understanding. I expect Tudor's ascension to Ealdorman of Gloucestershire will be good for our relations with that shire going forward. Snottenshire, Northumbria, the tale of two Jarls. First, here's Modron from the previous section. The so-called Witch of Gloucestershire carried on certain Celtic traditions and rituals embedded in the region by its pagan history and Arthurian legend. Modron was also a powerful healer. Some said she was imbued with the gift of prophecy as well. One thing was sure, she despised Tudor's Christian sanctimony so much that she concocted a grim plot against his life. So here is Schottenheimer, Northumbria. The Tale of Two Jarls. Eva received a summons from her childhood friend Vili in Schottenhire, asking her to attend a great feast celebrating his father's Hemming, the Shire's Jarl. Under Hemming's wise reign, the ruling seat of Snottenham had become well known as a place where Saxon and Dane folk dwelled together peacefully. A pledge of alliance from Hemming Jarl would add a truly formidable partner to Randvi's strategic map. When Eivor arrived in Stonningham, she met another old comrade, Tregov, who reported that Vili and his father were out starving off another Pict invasion, an omnipresent threat in the Northland. So here's Hemming Jarl, right over here. One of Halfdan's most trusted generals, Hemming had long been the tip of the Viking spear against the Picts, massing north of Haldrun's wall. His reign in Schottenhire was notable for his ability to bring Danes and Saxons together as fellow Shire folk. Unfortunately, his health was failing, and a new Jarl needed to be chosen. Who could follow in such footsteps? So key events. To support Hemming and Vili, Eivor escorted Tregov's convoy of supply-laden sail steeds up a hostile stretch of the Dubris River to the Viking encampment outside Ucklethorpe Fort, the Pict citadel. After successfully storming the stronghold and routing his foes, Hemming confided to Eivor that he was gravely ill and ready to step down. Sadly, it wasn't long before the great Jarl passed into shadow. After the funeral, an Althing was called, bringing nobles and thanes from across the Shire to choose his successor. Hemming Jarl's longtime wish, of course, had been to see his son take his place, and Vili was indeed the obvious candidate. But Vili did not want the full weight of the clan on his back. Instead, he yearned for freedom. He told Eivor, "I only want some of my skin and an axe in my hand, ale and adventure, not the staid life of a Jarl." Nor did loyal Tregov, the other clear candidate, wish to step ahead of the young Hemmingson he'd helped raise and train, but Eivor helped broker a suitable final decision at the Althing, and the Raven clan gained as strong an ally in Snottenshire as any on the island. So here's Vili. Eivor's dearest childhood friend Vili Hemmingson was a great warrior and a natural leader, a fitting offspring of his father Hemming, but Vili's free-spirited warred against his sense of filial responsibility. Was he ready to inherit the role of Jarl to his people, or would it be too great a burden to bear? And here's Tregov. This loyal warhorse was Hemming's capable steed. He loved Vili like a son, too. Eivor felt that Tregov could be an excellent Jarl, but would he be more valuable as a trusted advisor in the court of young Vili? Side note, I've spoken with both Eivor and Basim about the changes we've noted in Sigurd since his rescue from the Order's cruel witchwoman Fulki. Interestingly, we all see him differently. Basim sees only a more introspective and thoughtful man, but Eivor senses a fundamental alteration of Sigurd's personality, a loss of feeling. All happiness leached from his demeanor. To be honest, I tend to agree with Eivor. Sigurd now speaks as if strange gods whisper in his ears. Winchester, the city of faith. Eivor was ready at last to infiltrate the Wessex capital city of Winchester. Following up on a tip from our shadowy source, the poor fellow soldier of Christ, Eivor found a very high-level contact in the Old Minster Church, none other than King Alfred himself. The Wessex monarch spoke of an order-instigated assassination plot against him by 3 powerful order acolytes. Alfred called the Order of the Ancients a terrible cancer and asked Eivor to help him surgically remove it from the English body politic. She agreed, and the deal was made. Key events. With investigative help from Alfred's loyal Fengchun, Reeve Goodwin, Eivor was able to root out and terminate the Order operatives. The Gallows, a corrupt Reeve of Winchester named Selwyn, who used public execution as a fear tactic. The Quill, an anti-educated an anti-education zealot named Hilda, who employed orphan children to spy and steal and target foes in the Seax, the fallen bishop of Elfrith, who went so far as to fake his own death so he could sneak up on Alfred in disguise and assassinate the Wessex king. In the course of Eivor's investigation, she managed to infiltrate the Order's inner sanctum in Winchester, called the Temple of Nithras. There she recovered documents filled with information about the Order's methods, critical intelligence that she eventually passed on to me. By crippling the Order's operations in Winchester, Eivor helped us put the vile organization on the run in England. Only Hampshire remained as a shire where we hidden ones did not yet have the upper hand. Goodwin, Reeve of Winchester. Lord Alfred's right-hand man is a gifted administrator, having helped his king implement progressive reforms in Winchester and all across Wessex. But Goodwin is also a surprisingly adept swordsman and fighter. His ironclad loyalty to Alfred includes protection and enforcement. Hordelvik, in the Hall of the Slain. Here I must insert Eivor's account of an excursion whose details I find not only unsettling but also frankly hard to believe. Having observed Sigurd at most daily here in Ravensthorpe since his return from captivity, I was well aware of the young Jarl's moody and erratic behavior, but a few weeks ago Eivor visited my bureau to report that Sigurd, gripped in a fit of sparkle-eyed mania, had convinced her to ferry him back to Norway. Sigurd insisted he had something magnificent to show his adoptive sibling, a path to Valhalla, he claimed. Soon after they departed, my mentor Basim learned of the trip and rushed off to join them in Norway. I was happy to hear he would be there to oversee this expedition. And obviously, if you guys have played this game, you know that this is where we find out that Basim is indeed Loki reincarnated, and I believe Eivor is actually Odin reincarnated. And Sigurd, I forget who exactly he is, but I think he's the guy that helped Odin tackle Fenrir the Wolf, and he got his arm bit off. So, key events. Here, unredacted, is what Eivor reported on her return. Upon arriving in Alkerstad, Sigurd and Eivor paid a perfunctory visit to their father, Strigerborn, in a local pub. Then came a frigid sail up Hordelfik's icy northeast fjord. Led by Sigurd's memory of his visions, the two trekked up a perilous mountain path to a cavern known as Gjelmhaler. The cave's passage led to a massive stone gate of unknown origin that, according to Eivor, and I have no reason to doubt her, opened to a spoken password. Inside they found some sort of towering tree-like mechanism that seized them both, rendering them unconscious. This is where the story gets truly fantastical. Eivor claims she woke in Valhalla, a vast hall with rolling battlefields beyond, filled with Viking warriors. These were the legendary Einhar, great champions killed in battle, then escorted by Valkyries to Asgard's Hall of the Slain to commune with the gods in an exhilarating and endless cycle of feasting and fighting. In Viking lore, it is said this mystical existence continues until all are called to fight in the apocalyptic final battle known as Ragnarok. But Eivor soon tired of this repetitive dream world, finding it surreal and filled with unsettling contradictions. She convinced Sigurd to escape with her, but her exit was blocked by the All-Father himself, Odin, angry king of the Norse pantheon. Eivor claims Odin attacked her in a dark arena, and she escaped Odin's wrath only to find their exit blocked by none other than Basim, who would track them into the cavern. For all the insanity of Eivor's tale, this is the part I find most shocking. She insists that Basim threatened Sigurd's life, blade to throat. She said my master was cruel, brutal, even maniacal, spouting nonsense like an alehouse drunk, all the while raving about seeking vengeance for his son. In the end, Eivor defeated Basim, tethered him to the machine tree, and left him behind. Son, I knew nothing of this. In all our many years together, Basim never spoke of such a thing. Hampshire, Wessex, the prophecies of the king. Guthrum Jarl and his war bands descended on Hampshire to seize the last shire in Anglo-Saxon England not under Viking control, and thus squeeze King Alfred of Wessex from the regional picture. War seemed imminent, but Guthrum called a parley with Alfred in Wetham, a last attempt to hammer out an acceptable accord. Alfred had offered a Dunfield, a hefty ransom of silver, to Guthrum to leave Rurham, and the Dane accepted. But as Alfred exited the hall, he reported in a mocking tone, according to those present, that Ubbe Ragnarsson had been killed by West Saxon forces in North Hampshire. Enraged by this news, Guthrum's troops went on a rampage, pillaging Weirham as Alfred and his entourage escaped to a stronghold in Chephen. Key events. While Guthrum mustered his fighters at the river outside Chepham, Eivor called in favors from across the kingdoms of England, bringing in fighters both Dane and Saxon alike. Then she joined Guthrum in leading a mighty assault on the war-Saxon township. It was a terrible battle. Eivor lost good allies and friends, including Hjort, young Humwald, and the great warrior Soma Jarkona. But Guthrum emerged victorious in the end, and a new rule came to Wessex. Alfred, however, managed to slink away, a king without a kingdom, or so it seemed. And this right here shows Saxon soldiers patrol the misty hills of Wessex. An epilogue in Athelney. The Battle of Chepham in January 878 CE did not end Eivor's work in England. Her clan's political and military influence was now profound. Raven allies ruled every shire in all 4 Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, yet ongoing was Eivor's profound commitment to the task of purging the Order of the Ancients and lending support to our creed, this despite Basim's apparent betrayal in Norway. After Chepham, Eivor took up the task of hunting down the remaining members of the Order. Every zealot, Priost, Platinus, and Magister known to be operating in England. Eventually, our trove of accumulated clues led Eivor to the very top of the Order's hierarchy, the man who directed the Order's operations in Britain, the Father. She found him in Alkenay, a sleepy West Saxon town nestled in the boggy fenlands of western Hallandshire. The Grand Magister of the Order of the Ancients was none other than Alfred of Wessex himself. Living now in exile as a commoner, Alfred offered Eivor another shocking revelation. He was also our poor fellow soldier of Christ, the cryptic correspondent whose clues had helped us eliminate the Order's entire hierarchy. Repelled by the Order's godless views, he called them defilers of God's majesty and grandeur. Alfred had long worked to destroy the heresy from the inside, hoping to construct a new God-fearing organization in its place. As Alfred handed Eivor his Order medallion, he described the envisioned replacement. A greater idea, a universal, divine order, inspired by God for the betterment of man. Then he gave Eivor the key to his study in Winchester, a place he insinuated might be laden with secrets interesting to those of us who fought tooth and nail against the Order of the Ancients for so long. Lord Alfred's final message was one of warning. The wars have not ended, Eivor. You have simply stopped fighting. But men are brewing plots in mead halls and bedrooms. You will see. And when I remember this part of the game, reading and seeing this go on, basically King Alfred wanted the Order of the Ancients gone so he could now start what is now known as the Templar Order, which is crazy. Ireland. During my stay at Ravensthorpe, I met a savvy Persian merchant named Azar. Like me, Azar had left the Abbasid Caliphate for Europe. Her own travels led to Ireland, where she ended up trusted trade emissary for the King of Dublin, Baird Macumar. The two shared a passion for mercantile pursuits, and together they sought to develop Dublin into a regional trading hub. As it turned out, King Bjard was also a long-lost Norse cousin of Eivor Wolfkist. After Eivor helped Azar erect a trading post for Irish goods in Ravensthorpe, the two sailed across the Irish Sea to meet Baird in Dublin. Eivor's overall challenge in Ireland proved to be twofold. Help Baird and Azar build a booming Dublin-centered trade network while also navigating Ireland's tricky political maze of jealous kings north and south. These tasks were further complicated by the insurgent menace of the Children of Danu, a cult of radicalized zealots who embraced their native Druidic roots that had otherwise long since been abandoned in Irish lands. Major factions and sects. The Irish. For many years, the northern and southern branches of Ireland's dominant Uí Néill dynasty shared the Irish High Kingship, trading it back and forth. Whenever in power, the northern Uí Néill ruled out of Ulster, and the southern Uí Néill ruled from Meath. Eventually, because power so often corrupts, this rotating throne concept became continuous and even bloody in nature. Vikings had conducted hit-and-run raids in Ireland for decades, but eventually, larger war bands arrived looking to conquer territory. As a result, the feuding Irish factions temporarily allied under a high king named Aed Fanumhath to fend off the Norse invaders. Once the pagans were stalemated, the Vikings in Ireland were not as well organized as those in England, and the Irish are fierce fighters in their own right. The north-south struggle for the high throne resumed. The current High King of Ireland is Flann Sinna of the Southern Unnil. He has forged a fearsome army from a unique mix of Irish natives and warriors from local Viking clans. Children of Danu. This fanatical death cult is hell-bent on scrubbing Christianity from Ireland and restoring the Druidic traditions of their Gaelic ancestors. They worship the Irish goddess Danu of the Tuatha De Danann, a pre-Christian pantheon of Gaelic deities associated with burial sites like the Beoin tombs. Seemingly infused with the strange, often toxic brew of Ireland's fogs and fenness, the Danu cult has immersed itself in the darker aspects of Gaelic paganism: torture, human sacrifice, necromancy, and the summoning of murderous spirits. Eivor has made it a primary mission to track and assassinate every one of these twisted cultists, not unlike her vendetta against the Order of the Ancients. Dublin. Here is a Tsar. Scion of a wealthy family of Persian merchants, Azar developed a remarkable acumen for matters of trade. Seeking to blaze her own trail of success, she set out for Europe. In Ireland, Azar found a kindred spirit in King Bered and helped build Dublin's reputation as a regional center of commerce. And here is Bered mac Emer, King of Dublin, right over here. As a young Viking lad, Bered came to Dublin where his father, Emer, had risen to the throne. Encircled by distrustful Irish natives, the Norse enclave was often under siege, but Bered's passionate focus on trade and commerce opened doors to surrounding kingdoms and brought him good favor with the High King. In Dublin, Eivor discovered that her cousin Bered had big plans indeed. His ambition was to impress Ireland's preeminent leader, Flann Sinna, who would soon be crowned High King, a man who unfortunately distrusted Vikings. Bered hoped to secure his own tenuous kingship in Dublin by tethering his growing trade network to the High King's economic interests. As he told Eivor, Flann will see that the strength of Dublin's ports is the strength of Ireland. It was a sound scheme, certainly, but it would require some aggressive commercial expansion and a bit of muscle. This Eivor would provide. Key events. Eivor helped Azar expand Dublin commerce by establishing a trading post at Rathdon. With this post and later other posts established in other Irish territories, Bered's network gained greater access to coveted foreign goods and delicacies. For example, Eivor soon acquired a special gift of exotic spices for Flann Sinna's impending coronation as High King. Meath. Eivor traveled with King Bered and a woman named Ciara, Flann Sinna's court process, to the traditional High King coronation site on the hill of Tara in Meath. Once there, my Viking partner thwarted one assassination attempt on Flann, then retrieved the stolen Book of Kells, a holy text pilfered by Danish thieves. These acts helped endear Bered to the new High King. Key events. Eivor's next mission was to build support for Flann by currying favor with surrounding kingdoms in Meath. Her goal was to reinforce Flann's army with local troops and supplies, creating a strong counterweight to the impending alliance of hostile Ulster and Connacht. Directed by Sierra, Eivor completed a series of royal demands from local Meath kings. In return, they sent tributes of men and resources to Flann's southern army, bivouacked in the town of Knocklefree on Meath's western border. Sierra Ingen Medba, named as Olmuf in the Bard of all Ireland by the newly crowned High King, Flann, Sierra is an important figure in the royal court. Eivor says Sierra's word carries much weight in all matters, not just cultural. Both her bond with the mysterious Leah Fail monolith and her deep roots in ancient Connacht suggests a close connection to the old Judaic ways. In Knockfree, Eivor met the High King's War Council, which now included Bered, to plan an assault against Connacht forces garrisoning Cashel, an imposing stronghold atop the cliffs overlooking the border of Connacht and Ulster. Eivor volunteered for a spy mission to infiltrate the heavily fortified castle and unlock the main gates for Flann's southern army to breach. So right here, this whole drawing here, Sierra Ingen Midba still proudly bears the trappings of her pagan spirituality. Here we have Siegfried, son of Bered. This defiant lad worships the traditional Viking values of valor and glory in combat. As a result, Siegfried has trouble recognizing his father's genius in using trade to gain power in regional politics. Here we have Flann Sinna, Holy High King of Ireland, right over here. Born into the ruling clan Cholman, a familial branch of the southern Unnil dynasty, Flann was clearly destined for greatness. He was crowned High King, also called King of Tara, shortly after Eivor's arrival in Ireland. As leader, Flann forged a unique alliance of his southern Unil clansmen with the Viking settlers who remained. Connacht. Few I've met, even among my Hidden One's brethren, can match Eivor's stealth and infiltration skills. According to reports I've seen of the engagement, my Raven Clan friend slipped into Castle Castle with remarkable ease and threw open the entry portal for Flann's Norse troops. The subsequent assault was a smashing success, with Eivor, as always, spearheading the charge to the twin ring forts of the great fortress. Key events. After routing the Castle garrison, the Southern Army's victory was soured by a dire complication. Someone had poisoned Flann's Irish troops. Worse, a captured enemy soldier accused the Norseman Barrett of concocting the foul plot. But Sierra knew better. The toxic brew was a favorite of the children of Danu, the murderous pagan cult. With guidance from Sierra and a Druidic healer named Deidre, Eivor hunted down the ingredients necessary for an antidote that would cure Flann's soldiers. Back at Castle Lore's war room, Eivor joined Barrett and the High King in planning a grand expedition into Ulster, as Flann put it, the final jewel in my high crown. The target, the ring fort of Ailic, which Barrett called the strongest in all of the lands. As Flann announced that his southern army would make camp at Clogher, word came that the kings of Ailic sought peace talks. Barrett offered to speak for Flann, and the High King agreed. Puka. During her Irish adventure, Eivor claims to have tracked a supernatural creature called a puka. This beast is said to take many animal forms. Eivor is manifested in the form of a giant, fearsome werewolf. However, she admits her vision may have been twisted by a toxic, disorienting fog known to permeate the forested hills of southern Connacht. Ulster. And here it shows the hill fort of Ailic in Ulster. And here on this page, Abbot Egan Mac Carte. Egan, Abbot of Armagh, the so-called gods appointed in Ireland, seemed a natural leader of Irish Catholicism, giving his history of extreme piety and knack for power politics. But Eivor managed to uncover the abbot's secret hatred of the church and his role as founder and murderous head zealot of the children of the Danu cult. Ulster. For Flann to be secure on the High King's throne, he needed sworn allegiance from the northern Ulne lords in Ulster. Eivor completed a series of royal demands for them, earning good standing for Flann. She then traveled to Flann's war camp in Clogher and learned that Barrett had not returned from his Ailic meeting. Eivor offered to find her cousin. Key events. After acquiring a king's pass in Donegal, a Norse-run trading port in western Ulster, Eivor traveled to Ailic and gained access to the main hall. There she found Barrett feigning inebriation with two northern kings, Nell and Domal. Concealing a cleverly coded message in his drunken blather, Barrett sent Eivor down to the dungeons below the ring fort. There, Eivor liberated a squad of imprisoned soldiers, and with their help seized full control of the fortress. The defeated Ailic lords admitted that the mastermind behind the resistance to Flann's high kingship was none other than the good abbot of Armagh. Egan had been amassing troops to ambush Flann's southern army. Eivor hurried back to Clogher to report the betrayal, but war horns sounded just moments after her arrival. The abbot's troops had encircled Flann's camp and were launching a frenzied assault. With Eivor joining in the defense, Flann's forces managed to repel the onslaught, but only barely. The cost was terrible and bloody. Many good warriors were lost, including, sadly, King Barrett of Dublin. And right over here it says, the Giant's Causeway of Northern Ulster. From Dublin to Dunserverk to Armagh. Eivor oversaw her slain cousin's return to Dublin for burial in Gortna. She vowed to carry out Barrett's final wish, to broker the ascent of his son Sclurfith to the Dublin throne, with High King Flann's full blessing and patronage. At King's Hall in Dublin, my fellow Levantine Azar informed Eivor and Sulfrith that the children of Danu, led by one called the Seed, were supplying Abbot Egan's garrison in Armagh with powerful siege weapons and other war-fighting goods. Following Azar's tip, Eivor tracked the shadowy Danu network of arms dealers to the decrepit port town of Dunserverk on the northern coast of Ulster. There she terminated the Seed and obtained a letter that confirmed the shocking extent of Egan's treachery. The abbot himself was none other than the Oak, founder and leader of the children of the Danu. Eivor regrouped with Flann and Scurfith at the Southern Army staging area directly across the Blackwater River from Egan's stronghold towers of Armagh. With Eivor in the vanguard, Flan's forces swarmed the fortress and brought the traitorous cleric to an ignominious end. A final reckoning at Tara. After the great victory, Eivor traveled to the King's Land meeting hall in Daro Meath. There the gathered Irish lords entreated High King Flan to begin a fierce inquisition of all Druidic believers, hoping to flush out other children of Danu co-conspirators. The process, Sierra, being pagan herself, objected most strenuously, but Flan's decision was firm. The future of Ireland is a wholly Christian one. Every Druid would face inquisition and a choice, reform or exile. Such a course, Flan felt, would unite the kingdom. At this, Sierra stormed out of the hall. Eventually, Flan and Eivor tracked her to the hilltop of Tara, where the priestess had somehow awakened the ancient monolith known as Lia Fail, the Stone of Destiny. The glowing stone imbued Sierra with strange supernatural powers, and she lashed out in fury. But Eivor managed to neutralize the angry druidess. Afterward, a contrite Flan promised to undo the inquisition he'd initiated. Francia. Here it says Eivor and allies traveled down the Sequana toward the French city of Melun. This is in Francia. During the Raven clan's campaign to build alliances in England, 2 visitors from Francia arrived in Ravensthorpe. One, a Norse warrior named Toka, hailed from a Viking clan settled near Paris. The other, a Frankish fellow named Pierre, was described as her advisor. Interestingly, they came bearing extravagant gifts of food and drink, and quickly built a fine new guest house for the village. Wary, Ranvi sensed a bribe and asked my opinion. In my native culture, we feel such gestures deserve a hearing, but only if one's community is secure and incorruptible, and Ravensthorpe was certainly that. Ranvi agreed and sent Eivor to investigate. As it turned out, Toka and Pierre sought help from the Raven clan in their efforts to lay siege to Paris and drive out its ruthless king, Charles III, also known somewhat unceremoniously as Charles the Fat. Charles was a rising power in the region, successfully uniting the Frankish kingdoms under his rule, a grave threat to all Norse enclaves in Francia. Toka warned that once Francia was consolidated under Charles the Fat's rule, he would surely come for England next. Indeed, Ranvi's scouts in Francia, and my own Hidden One agents as well, had recently confirmed this growing menace. Thus, Eivor set sail with Toka and Pierre across the channel to meet Siegfried, their Viking leader on Frankish shores. The plan was to pledge Eivor's battle axe to Siegfried's cause and help him cripple the Fat King's ambition. Secretly, I'd also asked Eivor to hunt for a long-lost Hidden One central bureau, rumored to be buried beneath ancient Roman ruins in Paris. Major factions and sects. Melun clan. This clan of rugged Norsemen in northern Francia was once led by Cynric Jarl, but the Franks, under King Charles the Fat, slew him dishonorably, and his vengeful brother Siegfried succeeded him. Driven south by Charles, the clan settled around Melun and began to muster a Viking army capable of storming the gates of Paris. The Frankish military. The well-trained soldiers of Francia are one of the few fighting forces in Europe who can stand toe-to-toe with a Viking swarm. Led by Count Odo, right-hand man of King Charles, the Frankish infantry was rough, effective, tough, and well-equipped. The Franks also deployed a thundering charge of horsemen, heavy mail-clad soldiers, wearing fearsome lances and shields, supported by light, swift-range units, usually mounted archers who carried swords for close combat. Bellator's Day. Calling themselves God's warriors, their name translated from Latin, these religious zealots are big fans of grisly exorcism rituals, referred to as deliverance. Led by a demagogic scholar who went by the name Isidore Mercator, the twisted sect spread the fear of God literally across the Frankish countryside. Illinois. As Eivor traversed the ravaged Illinois province, she encountered much evidence of the brutal nature of Charles the Fat's attempts to expunge the Norse presence, an unsettling glimpse of the savagery Ravensthorpe could expect of Charles if Charles subdued Francia, then turned his bloody gaze to England. Here is Toka right over here. Toka Sinnerstad is no deep thinker, but Eivor is impressed with her leadership, instincts, and combat skills. Indeed, Eivor thinks of Toka as a younger sister, beloved and physically precocious. Cynric's daughter speaks her mind fearlessly, swings a deft sword, and wisely relies on the reconnaissance network and sharp-witted observations of her wily Frankish colleague Pierre. Pierre. This Sibbertrick Frankish rebel joined the Norse cause after his own compatriots under Charles abandoned him. Eivor tells me that Pierre loves love and isn't afraid to match wits or pints with anyone. More importantly, his covert network of informants has provided helpful eyes across the entire region. Here's Siegfried right here. Reports on this Norseman, the fellow who succeeded his slain brother as Jarl of the Viking clan based in Melun, portray a truly conflicted individual. A powerful warrior and charismatic speaker, Siegfried let hatred consume him in his quest to avenge Sinric's dishonorable murder. His impulsive, bloody moves displayed little long-term vision for the stability of West Francia. Engelwin. A sadistic Frankish clergyman, Engelwin was also a high-ranking member of a Gnostic cult of zealots known as Bellatorus Dei. The dark circles around his eyes gave him an otherworldly appearance, which he reportedly exploited for full effect. Eivor took a particular relish in penetrating his sanctum at St. Guinevere. So, key events. In Melun, Eivor pledged her axe to Siegfried, warlord of that Norse-controlled town. A skirmish with Frankish cavalrymen ended with Siegfried in hot pursuit of the fleeing Bishop Engelwin down the road to Paris. Eivor's report to me of the incident noted that Siegfried, although an impressively forceful commander, was prone to making impulsive and sometimes reckless decisions. I once heard Randvi describe the preferred demeanor of any Viking leader as wild heart, level head. Indeed, I have seen this very quality in the great Viking jarls, such as Halfdan and Guthrum, and yes, in Eivor herself. Paris. Eivor met up with Siegfried in the stinking Parisian slums. The pair observed a rousing speech by the king's right-hand man, an impressive fellow named Count Odo, the renowned protector of Paris. Siegfried also pointed out Odo's clerical counterpart, Bishop Goslin, a fierce warrior monk known for his stalwart presence on the battlefield. After a bit of investigation, Eivor managed to infiltrate Bishop Engelwin's fortified church of St. Guinevere and promptly assassinated the ecclesiastic menace. King events. While escaping St. Guinevere, Eivor discovered letters in the clergy chambers indicating that 1. Charles the Fat's wife, Queen Richardess, was an impediment to Engelwin's ambitions, and thus he'd sought to remove her, and 2. The king himself might be found in a brothel beneath the Boatman Baths Tavern in South Paris. Eivor found Charles and learned that the queen had already been abducted by an overly zealous church faction known as Bellatorus Dei, Latin for Warriors of God. Eivor and Charles worked out a deal. The Viking emissary would rescue Richardus, and in exchange, the Frankish king would negotiate his ambition for England. Then we have Charles, King of Francia. Like his great-grandfather Charlemagne, Charles the Fat united all of Francia under his rule, but unlike his forebear, Charles had displayed little acumen regarding how to rule. Rumors suggest that childhood traumas forged a fractured soul. Eivor's reports certainly portray a disturbed, devious man with dark layers of complexity. Here's Charles the Fat right here. Charles the Fat down there. The mad King Charles lies in repose, surrounded by numerous courtesans at one of his preferred Paris brothels. Everseen. Eivor returned to Melun to report on Engelwin's death and her meeting with Charles. Siegfried was happy with the former and not so happy with the latter. Pierre reported that his spies had just spotted Queen Richardus in the company of priests at Evreux in Francia's northwestern province of Everson. Eivor immediately set out for that commune. Little Mother Euphorisa. Do you need the devil burned out of you? Go see Little Mother in Aquila for some esoteric deliverance. This nun's soft-spoken manner masked a cruel thirst for flaying sinners in the crucible of her secret Bellatorus Dei den. Richardus, Queen of Francia. Once described as an unspoiled flower in a briar of poisonous thorns, a depiction that Eivor heartily confirms, Richardus could spy goodness in even the blackest heart. Her husband's, for example. Devoted to her stepson Bernard, bastard son of Charles, the Queen wanted nothing more than to humbly serve her subjects and help guide their souls to God. Key events. In Evreux, Eivor witnessed a sermon by a religious figure known as Little Mother, her true name, Euphrasia, and uncovered clues about the Queen's location that led south to Aquila. There, deep within a crypt most foul, Eivor found a chamber of ritual slaughter where Richardus was slated for murder. But Eivor managed to assassinate Little Mother and escort the Queen safely to nearby Lessex. In Lessex, Richardus introduced Eivor to the king's secret son, a lad named Bernard. From there, they traveled on to Charles the Fat's forward camp in the Arlonus forest. Eivor reported that en route, the queen performed a most wondrous healing of a wounded bear. In the camp, Charles expressed nothing but contempt for Richardus and unleashed his royal guard on Eivor, a truly treacherous betrayal of their agreed-upon deal. Eivor dispatched the soldiers quickly, no surprise there, then rode to Siegfried's staging area on the Sicana River, just downstream from the city of Paris. Bernard. This bright young son of Charles the Fat has thus far enjoyed a simple life, hiding from his father under the loving protection of Queen Richardis. But Charles desperately wants an heir to his bloodline, and Bernard is all he has. Return to Paris. Key events. As Viking troops prepared to lay siege to Paris, Eivor tried to convince Siegfried that a negotiated settlement would be the best for all. The High One says the dead till no fields. Would you rule a wasteland? Siegfried agreed to let Eivor try diplomacy. Eivor tracked Count Odo to his Paris manor and learned that no deal was possible. Odo would guarantee peace neither with Siegfried's clan nor with any Norsemen in England, including Ravensthorpe. A bloody siege of Paris now seemed inevitable. To support Siegfried's siege plans, Eivor helped secure optimal placement of his heavy catapults near the city walls. She also planned explosives beneath weak bridges on the Paris defensive perimeter, thanks to an intelligence from a Beatran smuggler named Nolan. Finally, Eivor tracked down King Charles to the amphitheater in Amiens for one last attempt to negotiate a peaceful resolution. Charles demanded that Eivor deliver his bastard son Bernard before he deigned to hold talks. Eivor rejoined Siegfried's army on the Sicana, then joined the assault on the gates of Ile-de-la-Cité, the city's heavily fortified river island. There she personally defeated the powerful Frankish warrior Ebels. But after Norse catapults breached the city gates, the Viking legion found itself in a hellish cityscape, swarming with foes. Eivor's report suggests the outlook was grim, until Toka helped her light signal fires at strategic locations for the catapults to target. Then Eivor felled Bishop Gonzalin, ironically, by dropping a Christian cross on him, as the war priest tried to rally his troops for a decisive counterattack. This broke the Frankish will to fight. With the deaths of his brother and soldiers fueling his hatred for the Franks, Siegfried was consumed by a vengeful bloodlust and began to slaughter innocent women and children, an act that sickened Eivor and Toka. Fortunately, Eivor managed to infiltrate the palace, defeat Count Odo in a duel, then convince him to call a truce. King Charles refused cavalry but offered silver instead of combat. Fortunately, Siegfried agreed, and the hostilities ceased. Let's go back. Count Odo's right here. Widely respected as the king's right arm, Odo is not only a capable warrior and military leader, but also quite formidable in his political intelligence and resolve. As Siegfried put it, this Odo is no willow reed who bends in the wind. Noted as a man of honor, the Count certainly seems destined to rule something somewhere. But what? And then this here, it shows the Vikings' siege of Paris. This beautiful photo here. And then Gonzalin, Bishop of Paris, known across Francia as the War Priest, this man of God was indeed a fearsome warrior. Gonzalin would plant his goddess staff, his golden staff, topped with a Christian cross on the battlefield, and defend it with an unholy ferocity. And Ebels, grim executioner of Paris and brother of Bishop Gonzalin, this brutish brawler was seen as a near invincible force of nature and a one-man silent on the battlefield. That is, until he met Eivor. Return to Melun. Key events. Back in Melun, much feasting ensued. Eivor tells me she even raced a pig. Amazing what enough need can convince a warrior to try. But Siegfried could not shake the vengeance that haunted him, nor shed the growing cynicism his hatred had bred. We are but a morning fog that will inevitably lift. Impulsively, he announced a bloody plan to violate the truce he just made with Charles. Thus, Eivor was forced to intervene, leaving Toka in charge of the clan. Afterward, Pierre reported news from Count Odo. King Charles was hunting for Richardus and Bernard, and Odo believed the queen was in dire peril. Eivor immediately set out to meet Odo at Epernay in Amonois province. In Epernay, Eivor toured Count Odo's family vineyard as they spoke of the great threat to Francia, embodied in King Charles and his reckless ways. As it turned out, Odo was mustering a rebel force to challenge Charles and seize the Frankish throne. Eivor set out to find the queen in Amiens. Key events. A trail of clues led Eivor to the Slaughtered Calf Tavern in Amiens, where she came upon a most gruesome massacre of Odo's men assigned to guard the queen. Eivor found and freed Bernard from a nearby church, sending him back to his home in Lissex. Then she tracked down Richardus to the king's villa in Amain. Charles had accused his queen of adultery and ordered a trial by fire, a truly barbarous ordeal. Miraculously, or so believed the onlookers, a cloud burst to extinguish the flames, thus proving the queen's innocence. Eivor administered justice to Charles in accordance with his misdeeds. Returning to the Miloon longhouse, Eivor arrived just as a contentious meeting between Count Odo and Tolka was escalating to the verge of combat. But the news of Charles the Fat's demise not only diffused the tension, but led to a general celebration, and to Odo's promise of having no Frankish designs on England. Odo would be crowned King of West Francia soon after. Before returning home to Ravensthorpe, Eivor also acquired a firm pledge of alliance from Tolka's clan. All in all, a good outcome for a little town on the Nini River. Epilogue. You are less mine than I am yours, and I ask of you only this: keep me honest in the times to come. Eivor Jarl Sona to her Raven clan. I hope this record does justice to the monumentous events transpiring in these northern lands, events I've either witnessed directly or had recounted to me by trusted sources. As I conclude this chronicle, I want to emphasize a central point. The spread of Raven clan influence under the inspired leadership of Eivor Venderstad has been an unqualified boon to our mission here in Europe. Indeed, my Viking friend displays an uncanny knack for nudging her allies toward what we hidden ones call the light, i.e. a more selfless view of leadership. Every land Eivor visits seems to engage more resilient against the type of fear-based position imposed by the Order of the Ancients. Certainly, all alliances in this oft-brutal age rely on marital muscle for survival, but I'm pleased to report that our agenda has made headway. More humanist values based on trust, respect, and free will are emerging even in the harsh hinterlands. My only regret, and it is a deep one, regards my master Basim. Eivor's tale of Basim's odd turn is difficult to digest. His disappearance is troubling. My mentor was a man of extraordinary skill and charisma, son of the architect who designed the great mosque of Samarra. Basim was orphaned at an early age. He stowed away on a caravan bound for Baghdad and spent his childhood years haunting the city's back alleys. As a young man, Basim became a street thief of legendary skill. I've heard some refer to him as a living mirage, the one who is there and yet is not. But remarkably, Basim rose above that life. As Master Rayhan has said, the way of light knows the darkness. A born seeker, Basim was drawn to Baghdad's House of Wisdom. He told me that the wondrous works therein steered him toward justice and insight. When the Hidden Ones finally recruited him, it seemed a perfect match of sensibilities, and he rose swiftly to the rank of mentor. Yet the Brotherhood harbored concerns about his ultimate loyalties. On my first assignment under Master Basim, a protection mission in Constantinople, I was secretly directed by our leadership to observe him closely. Despite this, I still say it was my great honor to serve as acolyte under Basim's guidance. I truly hope that whatever triggered his personal obsessions, as Master Rayhan described them, somehow guided him toward the peace he sought. In the meantime, I shall continue my daily efforts to monitor the region from my Ravensthorpe bureau. I will treasure every moment in this remarkable Viking settlement, my new home and my new kin. It says, The World of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Journey to the North, Logs and Files of a Hidden One, Viking Secrets Revealed, a full-color, oversized hardcover tome that chronicles Viking culture, history, lore, and mythology amid the action and drama of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Discover the history and culture of the Ravenclan Vikings as they struggle against the Order of the Ancients. Get an in-depth view of the setting of the game with descriptions and depictions of in-game characters and locales as the Vikings move from Norway to England, Ireland, and Francia. Experience Assassin's Creed Valhalla as it has never been seen before. Ubisoft and Dark Horse Books present The World of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, a journal kept by Hytham himself, which allows readers to explore Assassin's Creed Valhalla as they never have before. What best-kept secrets will you uncover at Hytham's side? Folks, thank you for watching this 4-part series. Thank you so much for those of you who have watched it all. I want to apologize in advance for any mispronunciations I might have had trouble with. There are a lot of Danish words that I just had to take wild guesses at, and I remember some of the pronunciations from the game, but then there are others that are just too hard to speak unless I knew them already. So I apologize in advance for that. Stay tuned for more videos, guys. I have finally caught up on my TV shows and movies. I am now ready to start Harry Potter, or I should say Hogwarts Legacy on the PS5. So I can't wait to start that. I'll be doing that tonight. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more videos in the future, and we'll see you next time. Bye.